Hello and welcome to Westmapod, the Christie Time podcast about Agatha Christie's secret identity. I'm Mark Aldridge. I research and write about Agatha Christie a lot, including for my books about Marple, Poirot, and the forthcoming The Swinging Christie's book, which is co-written with...
Me. I'm Grey Robert Brown, and I'm here with my... I don't care what anyone says. You're a burden that I'm willing to bear, Mark.
Oh my goodness.
I'm here with my very own favourite burden of all, Dr. Mark Aldridge.
Oh dear.
This is book 6, episode 6, The Burden.
I know. It's been so exciting. I really enjoyed this thing of really experiencing Agatha Christie in different ways. Like I've started to quite get into now, carry my Kindle around with me more than I used to. I quite often am picking out like random short stories of things from like, you know, The Mysterious Mr. Quinn or something, or just something, or The Hound of Death, where I haven't read it for a while. And just like, I'm going to look at that story like in its own right, rather than it being story 9 out of 13 that are in this collection. And there's something to be said for reading them like that. Because a big part of that for me is behind me are my boxes full of magazines, which have got Agatha Christie stuff in.
The Spice Girls models.
Just below their guarding.
Oh, I see. Oh, right, now it makes sense.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
For a minute, I thought we were somewhere ridiculous, but no, it all makes sense now.
But it's that funny thing about how different the contexts are when you go, oh, actually, if you read the story in the middle of Good Housekeeping or something, then it reads very differently to if it's in The Hound of Death or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've been enjoying that.
Yeah, I know, definitely. I would second that. There's something, I think we all come to Christie with so many assumptions, no matter how hard you try to shake them off. And in a way, that's a unifying thing behind everything we do as Christie Time, is we're always trying to either challenge those inherent assumptions. They may be right, they may bear fruit ultimately, but they're not necessarily beyond that kind of scrutiny and interrogation. Yeah, it's been so fun. It's funny because we've sort of done it in a few bursts, haven't we?
Yeah.
Just because of the way that the chips have fallen in terms of just life and everything else. But, you know, now we're talking at the moment having launched it, but the first episode was recorded more than a year before it actually dropped. So it's been a long old, it may feel only like a few weeks for listeners, but it's been a long old road for us. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But I mean, not over yet. So we're talking about this last book today, and then we will be doing a reflections episode to tie things up. So definitely stay subscribed to this feed after today. There will be more, and that is a threat.
It's always a threat, yes.
The Burden is the story of Laura and Llewwelyn. Laura is a young girl living in a tragic household when her brother Charles dies. Shortly after, her sister Shirley comes along. Her initial hatred of Shirley becomes a deep, possessive love, but a house fire could change all that. In the second part of the novel, we meet Llewwelyn Knox, a man whose identity crisis led him to God. But what has he got to do with Laura and Shirley? So in terms of context, our story starts...
This starts to be sketched out in 1955, so it's not like A Daughter's a Daughter, which had its sort of slow burn. This seems to have come to Agatha pretty close to the time when she was publishing it the next year. It got sent to Edmund Cork early in 1956, just before Agatha went off to Nimrod with Max, because at this time they were still doing their annual archaeological trips early in the year.
And okay, so you've sort of answered my next question, but what else is happening in Agatha Christie's life around this time?
So in 1955, Agatha Christie Limited is formed, which might seem just like, oh, well, that's a business thing. But it actually changes the way that Agatha can work, because the expectation now is 1 book a year. She works under a salary. Lots of decisions now she doesn't have to make. They can be made by other people.
Hopefully all the burdensome worrying about taxes and things like that have been removed from her shoulders as well.
And it's funny because you think there is a world in which, because she's only got to deliver 1 Agatha Christie book a year, that's the expectation, that she might have leaned into Mary Westmacott more. But actually she doesn't. She does do non-crime stuff. Star of Bethlehem in the 60s, Miss Perry in the 60s, which is crime, but not perhaps your traditional mystery. But yeah, on the whole, and more poetry as well, a little bit more poetry. But on the whole, she sort of sticks to that one book a year pretty much. And she has other projects. But it's funny that there is a world in which you go, oh, great, now I can indulge in Mary Westmacott.
Yeah.
But I think we'll talk a bit more in our reflections episode about her overall feelings about Mary Westmacott, because I think that's quite important.
So we revealed in our Rose and the Yew Tree episode that the secret is out and that the world knows that Agatha Christie is Mary Westmacott. Mary Westmacott is Agatha Christie. And, well, is there still a need for the Mary Westmacotts at all? The counter-argument to what you just said, I guess, is there still a need for them, for Agatha? And is that why this is, spoiler, the last one she writes?
I guess so. I guess that is a point that almost like the fun of it has been taken away from her.
Yeah, which she does sort of say in a letter, doesn't she? She says it's kind of been spoiled.
Yes. But the fact that she writes this one is the counter-argument to the counter-argument that you go, but then she obviously could find a way. And yet I think this is a story that hasn't got the personal elements quite so much as some of the other Mary Westmacotts, I would say.
Which maybe is proof that the pseudonym's main purpose wasn't to cover... Like we said this a couple of episodes ago, that there's been this perception that she was really personal under the Mary Westmacott pseudonym because she was able to, because that was the cover, and that was what the pseudonym was for. But the pseudonym's kind of a moot point now because everybody knows what that. Most people buying it would know what that means, even though she's still arguing that it shouldn't be prominently displayed in first editions and things like that. I mean, is there a case to say? So a daughter's a daughter, like you say, that exists as an idea before the revelation of the Mary Westmacott name. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like that needs to come out latterly, and it makes sense from a branding perspective to not call it an Agatha Christie because it isn't an Agatha Christie in a murdery sense. Maybe this was just the last idea she had up her sleeve that sort of made sense in a Westmacottish way.
Yes.
And then after that...
Well, yeah, I mean, as we've said before, there are plenty of Agatha Christie stories, short stories and plays that you can say are really Westmacotts because they're not focused on crime or on that sort of structure of solving a problem, which is generally what you want and expect from an Agatha Christie.
Yeah. I guess that maybe a question to ask then is why don't more things go out under the Mary Westmacott name, even though it was an open secret what that meant? Just, as I say, as a sort of branding thing. Is that what you would do now?
Yeah, maybe.
But you made the point as well that she certainly doesn't need to do these for financial reasons. Or, do you remember I think way back in Giant's Web, we said she's like a single mother and she needs to provide for Rosalind.
Yes.
It's part of the reason why she's working so much. And that, especially post the formation of ACL, that's not necessary in the same way.
No, she's a salaried employee.
Am I right in saying that because we're finishing up the Westmacott journey in 1956 and Agatha's process changes more next decade in terms of dictating most books in the late portion of her career, does that mean it's unlikely that any of the Westmacotts were dictated?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think so, no.
No. But isn't that interesting that, because I think that is one of the hallmarks of Christie's late style, which is maybe something we'll come on to. And that shows, I think, there's maybe, apart from Giant's Bread, there's quite a tautness to all of the Westmacott novels, which is maybe belies the fact that they were typed.
Well, I think also, and you often point out whether they're in parts or books and stuff, they have an imposed structure in a way that, say, Agatha Christie's thrillers don't necessarily have to have, that you can have They Came to Baghdad, you can go in lots of different places, or Destination Unknown. But for these, it's like the structure seems to have come first. That Agatha seems to know, right, book 1 is this, book 2 is this, and book 3 is that.
Definitely.
Which is...
Well, maybe you have to be stricter with a structure like that with a sort of literary novel, because you don't have so the crime is here, and then the investigation starts here, and the interviews are roughly here, and, broadly speaking, the structure of most Agatha Christie's is similar, if not the same.
Yeah.
Just because it's... the genre provides that, maybe.
Yeah. Well, thinking about Agatha Christie, who she does pop up from time to time in this podcast.
Funny coincidence.
Yeah. Let's have a quick look at what she was doing around this time then. I guess one is most obvious from last episode.
Yeah, so as we said last time, this is the same year, 1956, as A Daughter's a Daughter. The play debuted very briefly, 4 years on from when the novel of that story had been published. And I thought, so that's 26 years since the first Mary Westmacott was published. So we have spanned, in just 7 episodes, we have spanned 26 years.
Yes.
Which is quite incredible, really. And I don't know, I just wanted to pause and reflect on how that span is so much greater than what we've done on the Swinging Christies. We've essentially been looking at sort of 11, 12 years over there. And we've made the point before, but it's always worth saying that the world of 1930 is completely transformed in 1956.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, for Agatha, there's some great successes on the horizon, because although The Mousetrap starts in 1952, next year, 1957, is a year that it becomes the proper record breaker.
I can't believe it's so early.
It's so
mad,
funny.
isn't it?
Yeah, I always say this to people now about The Mousetrap. It's like, not only is it the longest running play of all time, but it has been for like over 60 years.
Most of its run.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, clearly that side of her career is going extremely well. And we've discussed, especially last episode, but her leaning into more theatrical writing for the stage more, which she loved to do during this decade.
Yeah. In terms of Christie novels around here, so we've got Hickory Dickory Dock in 1955. We've got Dead Man's Folly in 1956. We've got 450 from Paddington next year, 1957. Ordeal by Innocence in 1958, Cat Among the Pigeons in 1959, and then we're into swinging territory.
Yeah, and what a variety of stories those are as well.
Real variety. There's a reason as to why I've listed those, because several of them will come up again in the subsequent conversation. But again, like, I don't know, I think when we first started talking about doing Westmapod, I don't know if I connected that chronologically it essentially links up. I mean, 56, we're finishing here at 56. Cat Among the Pigeons is only 3 years away, and then we're into the period that we covered for the other podcast. Yeah, it's not that far away, the period of real kind of striking modernity. And there are little hints of that in The Burden.
Well, there's also, in an early version of The Burden, according to Janet Morgan, Christie biographer, she says that an early version of the story included an abandoned idea of 2 trains passing each other, which of course is 450 from Paddington. I did, last time I went to the family archive, I did try to see if where Janet Morgan had got that from. Again, not because I know that that's true, because Janet Morgan really did her homework, but she also did her homework like at the beginning of the 1980s, and things have gone missing since then, or just been filed away somewhere. Well, so I couldn't find any notes about The Burden, unfortunately, which is a real shame.
Gillian Gill, who writes about Christie, we've talked about her a fair amount on Westmapod, just because she does talk about the Westmacotts quite a lot. So she links it to 450 from Paddington too. She writes, both The Burden and A Daughter's a Daughter, for example, feature a relation of rare confidence and affection between a septuagenarian and a teenager. The combination of youthful hands-on energy and elderly detached wisdom is often invoked as a peculiarly successful partnership in detective novels such as What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw, the American name for 450 from Paddington, and she puts in brackets Miss Marple and Lucy Aylesbury, and The Clocks, Hercule Poirot and Colin Lamb. So again, we're moving towards our era. And it's worth saying, actually, while I think of it, that this book, like the last Westmacott, did first appear in the US in our swinging timeline in the 60s, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we'll talk about that shortly. In terms of the wider world, there's a lot of change and a lot of regeneration. We were speaking last episode about the Barbican, for example. So there's still like important parts of the country, Britain, that are thinking, okay, after the bombings, after the war, what are we actually going to do? We've got slightly beyond the point where you've just got to rebuild as quickly as possible so that people have got homes. And at the point of going, well, what do we want our city and our world to feel like? And I just wondered whether, because of all that regeneration and that idea of what's our country going to look like going forward, whether that contributes to an idea that maybe The Burden is a little bit old-fashioned, feels a bit old-fashioned in some ways, so it doesn't feel like it's part of that zeitgeist of going, the swinging Christies are just a few years away and we're moving towards this idea. What were your thoughts?
I think it feels less old-fashioned than A Daughter's a Daughter.
Definitely agree with that, yes.
Which is perhaps unsurprising given the origins of that were 2 decades previous. I don't know. The burden, like several of the Westmacotts, the burden tracks a period of years very clear, very explicitly in the text. It tracks a period of years running up to the present day.
Yeah,
so I guess
true.
it's possible to then, level that accusation at it that it's old-fashioned. But I found it very diverting and surprising. So I don't know. I don't know if I would fully agree with that. But it is interesting to speculate.
I mean, I feel that Ordeal by Innocence and Cat Among the Pigeons are really pushing and going and looking at a modern world. They feel much more modern to me than this does.
Maybe they are, but maybe they are in content, as in like, because you've got, Balenciaga and shift dresses and things like that. Like in terms of like literal stuff in the books, whereas this is the main theme is godliness, and that's in no way modern. But then I would say, and we'll get onto this in a big way, but I would say there's something very experimental with the structure of this book and quite surprising that maybe makes it feel more like a modern novel in construction, if not in content.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously the shadow of the Second World War still looms very large. We've got a few references. So Henry, who's Shirley's love interest and ultimately husband, both his father and mother were killed in the Blitz, he says. The Café de Paris bombing is a real bombing.
Oh, is
it actually happened in 1941. Wow. So it not only is she linking Henry to, recent history, but it's very specifically placed at something that did happen. And he talks about being demobbed. We had a reference to demobbing in Daughter to Daughter. I feel like the war references clinging to Henry is in some way supposed to point us towards the idea that he is a slightly tragic figure with an ultimately tragic ending. But we'll come on to that as well. Robin, the vicar's son, there's a mention of him studying at SOAS.
Yes.
Which, I mean, is not modern founded. I think it was founded in 1916. But SOAS it's now part of the University of London, but it's the School of Oriental and African Studies. Yeah. Particularly influential in contributing to the war effort. It basically, they supplied people that could speak Japanese.
Oh, of course, yes.
So in that flashpoint of the Second World War, it was particularly, not that it isn't culturally significant before that, and indeed to this very day, but there's a particular resonance, I think, with referring to that in the 40s and 50s. And then we do actually ultimately end up in Henry's world, in the Blitz-damaged London, in that fourth part, don't we?
Yeah.
I feel like you're fond of saying things about the Suez Crisis.
I
feel
don't know
you
why.
Keep mentioning the Suez Crisis.
Because I know very little about it. I think it's just because it keeps coming up, doesn't it? And every time I see it, I'm like, that's something. That's a thing that ties into stuff. You'd notice, though, because we were chatting last night about, did you notice that bit about the Egyptian student you said to me?
I'm sure this must be, and we've seen this a lot in the Swinging Christies, haven't we, where a word or a nationality or a country or a location or something is just lodged in Christie's brain, having read the paper, and then when she's looking for something far flung, she just sort of grabs it. So it's when Mr. Baldock is, or Baldy as he's affectionately known, is decrying women, as he often does, to Laura, and he says, if young Shirley goes to London and picks up with an Egyptian student and has a baby in Bloomsbury, you'll say it's all your fault, whereas it will be entirely Shirley's and possibly the Egyptian. I just feel like in 1956, I know, but
possibly the Egyptian might have had something to do with it.
I get, he's sexist, but he's not that racist. No. To be fair to Baldy, but you can't write something about Egypt or Egyptians in 1956 and not have the contemporary reader think of the big news story of the year that was anchored to exactly what was happening in Egypt at that time. I think people are talking about it at the moment because of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment.
Yeah,
I feel
maybe.
like it has.
Yeah. Because this is why because I'd sent you a message the other day to say, for some reason, Channel 4's doing a multi-part documentary about the Suez Crisis. And, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not traditional Channel 4 9 p.m. fodder. It's not 24 hours in police custody, let's put it that way.
But if you're listening, Channel 4, we are willing to work for you. We do take that back.
It was like my most watched channel. It's like my default. It's what I checked. Yeah. Was there anything on Channel 4 tonight? No. All right.
My most watched channel is called at Westmapod, and it's on YouTube.
Oh, that's so good.
It's my favourite. It's such a good channel.
I'm not so keen on one of the presenters.
No, the short one. Another contemporary reference I spotted, I don't know if this jumped out to you, they're talking at one point about a character called Miss Weeks, who's pretty minor, but Baldy, again, says, she's got Girton written all over her. Mind you never go to Girton, Laura. Again, part of his sort of misogynistic ranting. So Girton College is a women's college of Cambridge.
Right.
So women had first been allowed to study much earlier in Christie's career and in Westmacott's career, but it's not until the 40s that Cambridge finally relent. I think 48.
Oh, wow.
That Cambridge finally relents and will award women students degrees. So prior to that, you were able to study, but you wouldn't actually get anything to show for it. And I think Oxford was earlier than that. Other institutions were way earlier than that. It's funny that there are quite, and maybe this is a hint that we're on track to the swinging Christies now, but there are quite a few moments where I felt like it's proto second wave feminism, but I feel like there's a second wave feminism bent just creeping in. That there are some of those conversations about men and women feel like certainly in the next 10 years they're going to become even more relevant. But yeah, lots of interesting history for this one.
And what about the book's structure and its paratext? Now, I put in our notes, I was like, this is the first Westmacott that the title isn't a quote. And you quite rightly pointed out, technically it is. So
well, I wondered if we might come to fisticuffs over this. I mean, you're right in that can one word be a... Let's not get too deep into this. Can one word be a...
Yeah, it's like the door. It's like, oh my God, that's quoting from Shakespeare.
That's quoting me yesterday when I said, shut the door on your way out. It's like, yeah, I mean, of course. So in Matthew chapter 11, verse 30, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that is used as the epigraph of the book.
Right, okay.
I mean, technically that means...
in my ebook then, actually.
Oh, interesting. I mean, technically, in order to call it an honest-to-goodness quote, it should be called My Burden. But then I can see why you wouldn't publish a novel called My Burden by Mary Westmacott, who everyone now knows as Agatha Christie. I dread to think who might have thought that would be a reference to. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, if you squint and call Burden, at least, a quote title, then that means that all of the Mary Westmacott titles are quotes to some degree, be it Shakespeare or common sayings like a daughter's a daughter. So, well, I guess a giant's bread's more of a reference, isn't it? No, if you squint, it's a quote. Anyway, Agatha Christie does that, of course, too. But that is an interesting unifying point for all of the Mary Westmacotts.
It is, yeah.
It shows how broad her inspiration base is as well, because it's not like they're all Shakespeare quotes.
Yeah.
They're coming from quite divergent places.
And it had a very different working title as well, according to John Curran, of Angle of Attack.
I quite like that.
I love that title. I'm not sure that it quite works for the book.
The burden is more unifying. Yeah. Like one of the interesting things about the burden, you pointed out how the symbol becomes resonant right at the end. And the symbol is something that is threaded throughout. She refers to burdensome things, or people describe burdens in different ways throughout, and then the symbol kind of crystallizes right at the end. Yeah. And I don't know if you can have the same effect with Angle of Attack. That feels...
If I were last line that said, and I decided after all, that was my Angle of Attack.
The last line would be a fencing match.
Like Margaret Rutherford.
Margaret Rutherford, I was just thinking that. Yeah, I mean, it feels more combative and a little bit less literary. Maybe even does that feel more like a Christie title than a Westmacott title?
Yes. I think it's a really good title, though.
Yeah, I mean, steal it. Why
not? Maybe I will. So structurally, we're back in parts.
I think we speculated around Absent in the Spring and The Rose and the Yew Tree as to whether we'd abandon that because we were going into somewhere more modern, and there was something about the chapters and books that felt classical, Victorian novelesque, biblical even. But yeah, Westmacott seems to have returned to that. And makes those books feel like anomalies, and actually Westmacott's style is more suited to that kind of structure, I guess.
This really needs the parts, doesn't it? Because it's quite dizzying sometimes where you move, and we'll talk about how,
Well, yes. Yeah. I mean, that transition wouldn't work at all if there wasn't a part break in it.
Yeah.
The transition to Llewwelyn. But yes. I wanted to point out as well, though, framing devices are quite common in these Westmacott titles. Yes. So we had it in Giant's Bread. Yes. It starts at the opera, we go back. Unfinished Portrait is probably the best example of one.
Rose in the Yew Tree, I think, is a really strong one.
Rose in the Yew Tree starts with him and then goes back.
Yeah.
Absent in the Spring doesn't, does it?
No.
But we do have that lurch towards the husband's perspective at the end,
and
which is almost the alternative.
And she's remembering stuff in flashback as well.
Exactly.
So it's almost like her being in the desert is the framing device
Very
to her
true.
remembering.
Yeah. We don't have any... A Daughter to Daughter is much more linear, but, I mean, that comes from the play, which sort of by classic play 30s, 40s, 50s kind of playwriting standards kind of has to be that way, have that unity. The framing device, I feel like Westmacott is slightly more experimental with the framing device here, because the prologue is Charles dies and it's the new baby's christening. It's Shirley's christening, isn't it? It's in the church and it's drafty and it feels really evocative. I think it's a really brilliantly written opening chapter, and you establish the tensions between the family and the hatred and things that, you know, quote unquote, shouldn't be felt between this family. And then part one goes back to explain how we came to this point. So Charles is resurrected, and then we discover Shirley along the way and how that happened, and track Laura's changing perspective on the different people in her family as a kid. And then chapter 3 tees the prologue up. And then chapter 4 starts with enjoy the christening. And you as an astute reader are encouraged and demanded to realise that is where, chronologically, that's where the prologue goes.
Yeah.
And that is that's much more complicated than the framing device in Rose in the Yew Tree or Unfinished Portrait, for example, which are very clearly signposted and you take a lot longer to get back there.
So part 1 is Laura in 1929.
Yeah, and then part 2 is called Shirley 1946, although we do still stick with Laura mostly, but it's about Laura's obsession with Shirley in a way.
Yeah, and then part 3 is our turn to Llewwelyn in 1956.
So the present day, yeah.
So yes.
And then part 4 sticks in the present day, 1956, and we go to London and we come back to Laura.
Yeah.
But it's called As It Was in the Beginning, which again feels, we say this all the time, but the wording feels inspired by Genesis, which makes sense for the theme, the main theme of the book.
So in terms of publishing, the first edition in the UK has got this, again, very text-based, but with a couple of nice design elements. And it's a pink on orange with black and white text. So those are like clashing colours, but they're often used because they clash. And I think that's obviously the intent here, because it's so striking that you would not normally... It's not like polite in a way. It's not refined to put pink and orange together. They are attention grabbing. It's a bit RuPaul. Yeah.
Is that supposed to be a star, the little symbol?
I think so, but I feel it's just like a modernist design.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's there to actually represent anything other than
although, I mean, that does...
modernism.
I do immediately think religious iconography around stars. So if that's the intention, it does make sense. It's very similar to a cover from around the same time. This is why we listed the novels from around this period. So Ordeal by Innocence, the first edition UK cover, it's the same orange.
Yes.
And in terms of, I mean, lots of the covers around this period are text-based because Agatha famously was not so keen on some of the designs she'd been shown that were more illustrative in the past, or, you know, depictions of Poirot, for example. But yeah, it's exactly the same shade of orange, and it's a similar... I mean, the 450 from Paddington cover is very similar to this as well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's no desire at this point or need to give them their own aesthetic language, the Mary Westmacotts, because, of course, we know.
No, not at all. But I do think that's something quite... I could see Muriel Spark having that cover for The Burden.
Yeah.
Really could. It's worth saying also, I should have mentioned that this was published on 12th of November 1956, which is a week after Dead Man's Folly.
Yeah.
And I find that quite interesting because you could publish this any time of the year, and yet they are leaning into this Christie for Christmas thing. Whether Agatha's aware of it or not, they're obviously thinking, well, hey, why not give someone 2 Agatha Christie books for Christmas this year?
Is it, I mean, nowadays we'd say, is there like a halo effect around the publicity?
Very possibly.
If people are already talking about Christie that month, it makes sense. Especially because, as we said in previous episodes, we've moved to a different publisher now. So it's in their interests to I think you made the point, like, it's like they've got an Agatha Christie now.
Yes, yes, that's true, yeah. So Christie, or Mary Westmacott, was unhappy with Heinemann's initial description for the book jacket. She wrote, I have never read a more undistinguished blurb. Unfortunately, the blurb doesn't seem to survive, or I couldn't find it, which is a shame. Apart from most of it not being English, I refused to have a complete synopsis made. So presumably it spoke about the sort of handbrake turn of the Llewwelyn sections. So Christie actually wrote her own version, which she did a few times actually, which emphasised Laura and her emotional journey, and a claim that the plot is as fast and well-knit as one would expect from the creator of Hercule Poirot and his cases. There is, besides, great insight into the disguises behind which the human heart likes to hide. So Agatha's happy to not just refer slightly obliquely to the fact that it is a pseudonym, but to be more explicit enough to say, you love Poirot. Here's something that looks at the human heart in a slightly different way. But
I've got to say I agree with that as a description of the book. Actually, I'm suddenly thinking, I wonder if she would hate my summary of it earlier in the episode. But.
Yes, but it's a means to an end. In America, it was once again declined by publishers. So Good Housekeeping found it much too downbeat, Ladies' Home Journal didn't like it, and Farrar and Reinhardt, who are the actual book publishers, they also turned it down. They feel it is almost hopeless as far as sales potential goes. They can't quite understand why this should be, but they feel that when Agatha Christie becomes Mary Westmacott, she is not at all successful at characterisation. So didn't appear in a book form in America until 1963 paperback, just like A Daughter's a Daughter, but it did appear in Canada in the Star Weekly magazine, actually before it debuted in the UK. So Canada quite liked it, but yeah.
And this, we're looking at a picture of the Dell paperback now, and not only is the girl depicted very swinging, but dare I say that the sort of castle almost behind her.
It's quite Eastern European, isn't it?
I think it's giving Passenger to Frankfurt. I've got a Passenger to Frankfurt cover that's not dissimilar to that. And we will go on to, especially in the latter half of the novel, talk about the ways in which this book seems in conversation with that book.
Nice.
No adaptation, no radio adaptation.
No, nothing for this
a couple
one.
of them, as we've discussed before. But in terms of the critical response at the time...
only a few reviews, really. They're quite mixed. Nottingham's The Guardian Journal called the sisters convincingly drawn with the plot deftly handled, and The Telegraph called it a nice domestic novel. The Guardian's critic... Oh dear, this isn't a nice review. It's a really mean review, actually, because all the critic does was reproduce some of the more melodramatic moments, like he swore under his breath. He cursed Henry Glynn Edwards and the disease called polio.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that sentence in the context of the book. I mean, you could take any sentence out of any book and make it sound rubbish.
Yeah, I think it's the same review that rolls its eyes at Fatal Apple as the name of a lipstick as well. I think he's saying it doesn't go for subtlety, this book, which I don't know is true, but clearly from the perspective of the critic.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more subtle than A Daughter's a Daughter.
Yeah.
Having just, because peek behind the curtain, dear listener, we're recording those 2 episodes and this one in quite quick succession, whereas some of the Westmapod episodes we've recorded with a bit more of a gap, so maybe it's fresher in our minds. As we always do, we're going to talk about the autobiographical elements that are evident in The Burden, this book. Kick us off.
Well, I noted that there's this mention of a man wanted a son, which is mentioned, and it made me think of both Archie, which I think it's referred to in the autobiography, but Dermot, most particularly in Unfinished Portrait, who we see likely as a version of Archie, or
Agatha's
certainly inspired by
Agatha's
first husband. So yes, I just thought that immediately made me think of that.
Yeah. Also, A Man Wanted a Son feels like an alternate, the other side of the coin to A Daughter's a Daughter, doesn't it?
Oh yes. There's not everything that's true ends up being a rhyme world. Don't have to make a rhyme everything. Just because it rhymes, it doesn't make it true.
Is that a Simpsons quote?
I don't know. You wouldn't lie to us through song. It's a Simpsons quote.
Obviously, the book sort of strays away from Charles and it actually becomes more about Laura and Shirley. But when, in the early parts, when it's very much about Charles and the legacy of his death, I was thinking is this like a son's a son? It's like we've just done a daughter's a daughter, and now Christie's doing a son's a son. But we'll come on to a lot more parallels with the daughter's a daughter shortly.
And something not to dwell on, but I was amused by lavatories came into the category of things which Nanny had said little ladies don't talk about. And there's so much in the autobiography about toilets and loos, including like toilets on the middle of a staircase and how that was all quite scary, and all these loos being installed at Greenway and stuff. And honestly, once you start to notice it, Andrew Wilson, I think, was the person who pointed it out to me.
But it also made me think of, there's a quote, the house had been de-requisitioned with startling abruptness. And of course, then you writing about lavatories made me think of Greenway's loos.
Yes.
Is there grounds to compare the character of Charles to Monty, to Agatha's brother?
I don't know that we get enough of Charles to be able to... What was your thinking?
Not in terms of characterization, but...
Two sisters and a brother
Two sisters
Agatha,
and a brother.
Madge and Monty.
Yeah.
So Monty's the older brother
and
of
Monty
Agatha.
is... obviously, Monty doesn't die as a child, but he does die earlier in life than Madge and Christie, sort of cut down earlier in his prime kind of thing. And he is a complicated character that I feel Agatha has complicated feelings about.
Yes.
And also was the favourite, is that fair to say? Or she perceived him as the favourite?
I don't know. But I think certainly was indulged more than...
Well, there
because
you go,
she tells a story about when Monty would go with Madge to go and get sweets, and would get all the sweets and then say, oh, she'll pay, and would like almost be like daring her, who he knew was much more nervous, to say, no, I'm not paying for him, so that's how he would get. And he would do things like that. That was a very Monty thing to do.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's possible parallels there. I mean, write in if anyone else had a similar thought. Max Mallowan, Christie's second husband, who writes a fair bit about the Westmacotts in his memoirs. There's a whole couple of chapters about Agatha, and he talks about the Westmacotts. We've quoted his memoirs a few times. And on the subject of the burden, he says, did Agatha herself have violent thoughts, and did she project them out onto the people in her world and dream of that secret, imperceptible violence being turned back upon herself?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting, not least because Agatha is outwardly such a... I mean, people say this all the time for someone that writes about such gruesome murders. It's part of her appeal, I guess. We all have grudges and dark thoughts and hatreds bubbling up. And that is something that certainly the last two Westmacotts have very much indulged.
What about Easter eggs? We love looking for Easter eggs. Let's talk about any from other Westmacott books first.
Yeah, well, now we have a bank of 5 other Westmacotts.
Yes, much easier, isn't it?
Whereas before we focused on other points of comparison, finding little references and hints to Agatha Christie works. But of course, there's so much more from Mary to choose from now. I don't know if you felt like this. I felt like the first part of the burden about the kids felt very much like the first part of Giant Spread.
Yeah, I could see that. It didn't come to me, initially, but when you say it, I see what you mean.
Yeah, in terms of like, there's Nursey and there's God and there's the children running around, and that's their whole world, and the little games they play, and and I think we can't know for sure that Agatha knew or was certain that the burden would be her last Westmacott. But if we're looking at this as the late style of Westmacott, it's nice that it circles back to the first.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Like I say, it may be because we've just done A Daughter's a Daughter, but there is so much from A Daughter's a Daughter to be found in here. We have a Richard and a Laura.
Yeah, I thought that was odd, I have to say.
Straight away.
Yeah.
I mean, Christie recycles names, of course she does. There's so many hundreds of stories you couldn't not. But given that there are sort of 5 main characters in A Daughter's a Daughter and 5 main characters in The Burden, and in both books back to back, you have the same names used again. It's worth saying that the Richards don't really bear much similarity, and neither do the Lauras. So maybe that's why Christie felt comfortable in reusing them. But there's so much, isn't there, about... Well, even the book even explicitly says that Laura has mothered Shirley and that she's treated her more like a daughter than a sister. And then Baldy says maternal love is a possessive love. All of that is A Daughter's a Daughter. It's basically lifted. And indeed, Shirley compares Laura, when she's finding her overbearing, to a heavy Victorian father. We talked also in A Daughter's a Daughter about the... Oh, what did you call it? The desert something theory?
Oh, yeah, desert meditation theory?
The desert meditation theory, which Laura brings up, which is essentially the whole concept behind Absent in the Spring.
Yeah.
And we get it here, but we get it on a mountain.
Oh,
so we
nice.
get Llewwelyn having the same, sort of... But basically, that's where Llewellyn's calling comes from, is his spiritual experience on the mountain, in the mountain air, sort of mystical. And he loses everything. He even loses his tent. And all he's got is his own thoughts, which is very much like Joan, without even a book to read and nothing but her thoughts to keep her company. And Mr. Baldock says at one point that he prefers roses to human beings. They don't last, for one thing. And of course, the rose and the yew tree, the whole point is that the rose is brief, but the yew tree is long, but there's something special in both of them. I've been tracking, as you know, Dr. Mark Aldridge.
Yeah.
I've been tracking the floral imagery, the horticultural reading of the Mary Westmacotts. And if I've been saying that the previous 5 in some ways were spring novels, I wonder if The Burden is the one that almost opens by saying we're moving somewhere colder and less floral and a bit... I mean, literally, you open in this drafty church and Westmacott writes, there was only dampness and the foreknowledge of winter. It feels like we're very much moving away from a bit more levity, a bit more warmth.
Yes. Yeah.
Tonally. Also, the flowers just aren't as nice anymore. We get a very brief reference to sweet peas, but it doesn't really last. Shirley gets daffodils at one point and says they're not so nice, rather cheap and past their prime, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
Mr. Baldock is not a good gardener. We've had good, skillful, like I'm thinking Sarah last novel, being skillful with flowers. But here, Mr. Baldock is a bad gardener. His garden's full of weeds and it's been too wet this summer to actually, do anything. But then the floral imagery makes a late resurgence and we end somewhere. I don't know about you, I thought maybe the book would end quite downbeat, and it doesn't. We actually go somewhere quite happy, and we have a late resurgence with the smell of lavender being associated with Shirley, and that is how we find out that Shirley is Shirley when we meet her again in the later half of the book. Those sort of, I think they look a bit like tattoos, but those floral Miss Marple covers they have in the US. I mean, there's grounds to package the Westmacotts in that way. Maybe not in a way that looks like arm tattoos.
Oh, yeah, there have been editions that have emphasised the sort of flowers and stuff.
But then maybe it's difficult, isn't it? Because maybe that gave rise to this
romantic,
slightly discriminatory perception of them being romantic. But I mean, floral, as hopefully I've demonstrated, this floral imagery is much more nuanced than just being like flowers, women, love. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Easter eggs from Agatha Christie books?
Yes.
So the opposite, I don't think, is in anything. We get the house burning down quite early on in The Burden. I don't think Christie's ever done that.
Witch Hazel, which is not published,
sure,
has got a central aspect of the early part of the story is about a house burning down.
But it would be such
House
an
of
obvious...
Death has got not the whole house burning down, just a fire.
So the car
right.
is set alight in the body in the library, but it's in a quarry. It's not the same. I mean, for a murder mystery writer, you would think an obvious way to off people.
I guess Taken at the Flood, but it's got a bombing, which is not quite a fire. But
no, it's an explosion, really, isn't it? But also Gosford Park, which for many people is one of those things like Knives Out that sort of as Christie-ish as you can get without being Christie, culminates in a fire that's not dissimilar to the fire that you get here, like an escape through the roof.
I thought that there were hints of the backstory to Five Little Pigs. I mean, there are lots of backstories in Five Little Pigs, but especially about the sisters' relationship that changes after a violent incident. That's a
I hadn't
big
even
thing.
thought of that. I was thinking Five Little Pigs in terms of Richard Wilding, who's the artist, the painter character that we get later on.
Yeah.
We literally come upon him. He's a painter. He's in this kind of nook of greenery at the end of a zigzag path with an easel. I mean, that to me is Amyas Crail. So it's funny that we both thought Five Little Pigs, but in different ways.
Milchester
Yeah.
Yes, one of our Christie locations. So it's from A Murder is Announced, but probably better known from the Margaret Rutherford films. Marple lives in Milchester rather than St Mary Mead.
Yeah. Do you think that is a deliberate reference from the filmmakers, or do you think they just so happened to rely on something that Christie had written?
I think, and I would have to double check, but I think that there's a reference to Milchester Station in 450 from Paddington. And I think that they just sort of merged those ideas. Thought, yeah.
Do you think it was deliberate or a misinterpretation?
I just honestly wonder whether St Mary has got the potential to mean something different in America to audiences,
maybe,
rather than just calling it Milchester.
I always thought Milchester sounds like a bigger place than St Mary Mead. St Mary Mead feels like a hamlet. Milchester feels like a market town, like Wallingford.
Yes.
So maybe as well, I don't know, maybe they looked at where they were filming it and thought this looks a bit more bustling.
Yeah.
Slightly more bustling. still very rural, but I don't know, maybe there's something in that.
And then the other A Murder is Announced thing is that there's mentions of heating in October. Heating being too early in October, which shocked me, because I think October was absolutely prime, put the heating on time. But of course, in A Murder is Announced, that's an important thing about the radiators coming on and, you know, the timing being right for that, and whether people have put their heating on or not at the, you know, on the appointed day. There's also with Mr. Baldock, or Baldy, who's asked, is it wrong to pray for anyone to die? And he says, in my view, it would be unpardonable interference. And this whole thing about praying for someone to die, that is from The Man from the Sea as well.
We talked about The Man from the Sea around the time that we were recording the Unfinished Portrait episode, which we recorded in Tenerife. I'm just going to say it now. We go to an island later in this book with Llewwelyn that's clearly Spanish. We hear Señoro. That's got to be Tenerife, hasn't it?
I think that's a fair thing to say that's certainly influenced by it.
But nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever says, when we talk about the Tenerife connections to Agatha Christie, nobody ever mentions the burden. When I got to it, I was like, this is Tenerife as well.
Yeah.
Down to the fact that a white villa with green shutters.
Oh, there you go. Very good.
Which is in The Man from the Sea. We took a picture next to it. It will be on our feed. Have a look now, dear listener. I'm sure that's where Richard lives. Is a white villa with green shutters. And in The Man from the Sea, you can literally go in Puerto de la Cruz. We did to that tree-lined avenue that ends with, and it's still there now. That white villa with the green shutters.
Yes.
And that avenue culminates in what used to be a sheer drop into the sea. You can stand there and feel Agatha's imagination being sparked by it.
Yes.
But again, it feels like if she knew that the burden was the final Westmacott, or likely to be, and the first part has these hints of Giant's Bread and the latter half has these hints of Unfinished Portrait, it feels a bit like is there an argument to say that this is a Westmacott greatest hits?
Indeed, and I think that there is definitely a case to say that The Man from the Sea is quite Westmacott-ish in lots of ways. There is a Westmacott version. It's a Mr. Quinn story, for those of you who are not perhaps so familiar with it. So it's in the Mysterious Mr. Quinn collection.
Yeah.
Another, perhaps lesser-known Christie recurring character is Parker Pine. And I did notice that Llewwelyn said to Shirley at one point, "Have you got everything you want?" Which is Parker Pine's advert. That is his refrain of like, do you have the life that you want? Are you happy? Which again is quite a Westmacott-ish thing.
I was
the
just
first
going to say
dozen Parker Pines, which are much more about people coming to him for happiness, are very Westmacott. The rest of them are a bit more mystery-ish.
There's an argument to make that all of the Westmacotts concern themselves with pursuing happiness within oneself. That's kind of where the whole desert idea comes in. But also, rather than seeking something external, it's very much the text of Absent in the Spring, but I think it's the subtext of the rest of them. It's like when the chips are down, when your relationships are complex, and maybe you're on your own, or you feel like you're on your own, how can you find a way out of it mentally? Yeah. Which, when you look at it like that, that's modern autofiction. I've said this on the podcast before. Speaking of the modern world, we're going into this swinging era, and I just couldn't help but draw out a few swinging parallels to the text that we talk about over on the Swinging Christies that she wrote between 1959 and 1971. So after the fire, the Georgian house is described as slightly lopsided. it's not quite been rebuilt. And we talked in our revivalism episode on the Swinging Christies about Christie's preoccupation with houses that are sort of hodgepodge, or not just houses. The Pale Horse is half old, half new. It's got timber going into a newer construction. The House in a Christmas Pudding has got a wing that's 14th century. Yeah. That's draftier, that Poirot won't go into because it's chilly. And the Mirror Cracked Gossington Hall is remodelled to the point where the corpse that would have been on the library carpet or rug in The Body in the Library, you can no longer quite work out where that library room would have been in the new floor plan. And it made me think of Greenway. There were wings either side.
Yeah, that got demolished. Yes.
Is that before Christie?
Well, after she bought it, yeah.
Right, yeah.
So she had them demolished.
Yeah. So what we see now is really just the middle part of what would have been the house before.
Yes. They were additions that she then had removed.
Right, I see.
So,
yeah. At one point early on, did you notice this? Someone says, I went off with someone else's tennis racket yesterday. Awfully stupid of me. What are we thinking of there?
Yes, little Cat Among the Pigeons reference.
Yeah, so that's a crucial part of Cat Among the Pigeons, which, as we said before, it's only a couple of years after this, 3 years after this. We get a Lady Macbeth reference, she should have died hereafter, which I've spoken about before. I find Christie's preoccupation with prolepsis and foreshadowing, cluing, and determinism really interesting. And that is a big part of By the Pricking of My Thumbs.
Yeah.
And that is quoted again in that. The lipstick that's called Fatal Apple.
Yes.
Alternate title of Halloween Party, no?
I love it.
I mean, it works,
my goodness. No? Yeah, bring it to stage and call it that.
Fatal
Christie's
Apple.
Fatal Apple. Love it.
Yeah. And we'll talk about Passengers Frankfurt in a big way when we come on to it.
Don't we always?
There's just so much in there of interest. But this book, more than any other that I've read, feels like it was written by the same person that wrote Star Over Bethlehem.
Oh, interesting.
It feels deeply, deeply spiritual, not just in a way that she talks about God in, also in Giant's Bread or whatever, but it's baked in the Christianity of it. There's something very fundamental to the story here. We usually look at two main themes. This book is so unique, it feels like really the obvious two discussion points are Laura's story and then Llewwelyn's story.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with Laura's story, which encompasses Shirley and Charles and everyone else.
Yeah.
Let's talk about her.
Well, I found that early section where there's both envy of and jealousy of Shirley coming from Laura. I just thought that was so interesting in its
brilliantly
honesty
written.
And it just its bluntness. Like it's almost like it's a taboo. Because I have to say, we've got loving relationships with our siblings, but this idea that actually, there are very jealous people and people who think you're going to take the attention away from me or the love away from me, and also envious of what they are receiving, saying, oh, you're getting all the, presents or whatever. I just thought that's so brutal. And that's the bit that I always remember about this book. And I think that's true of quite a lot of people, because when you read reviews on Goodreads or whatever, the most recurring sort of complaint, I guess, or criticism is people saying, oh, but I didn't like it when we went somewhere else later on. And we'll talk about that.
I didn't remember. I agree. I didn't remember the back half at all. I think we were on a walk and you said, oh, because it goes off into, it's about someone else. And I was like, is it? I don't. And I had read, this is, but no, I agree. The shifting sands of these different relationships and the resentments and the changes, I thought all of that was really gripping in a way that in the hands of a lesser author, that would have just been like, Laura's always hated Shirley.
Yeah.
End of.
Yes.
And here's the bit, and maybe it would have built, but there wouldn't have been the same. It's writing advice now. You always get told you need reversals and twists and turns. You need things to change for the people to follow your characters.
Because I noted that, like I say, how brutal it is where Laura's thoughts about Shirley, where we're told, well, she's got Shirley in her arms at the christening. Supposing I open my arms and just let her fall onto the stones, would it kill her? Should she? Dare she? And you read that and go, oh my God, she's a psychopath. But then very cleverly, you go, well, actually, no wonder Laura's a bit screwed up, because you find out that so much of what you think maybe is her inferring or imagining, and just because she's a jealous person, is actually true.
Yeah.
But yeah, Angela, the mother, says of Charles about him being my beautiful boy, my darling, I still can't believe it. Why couldn't it have been Laura?
Yeah.
And it's just like...
she's kind of muttering it, but Laura hears.
Yeah.
And it's a really horrible moment. But then, I mean, I guess there's an argument to say that Laura's... it's not from Laura's perspective.
No.
It's a roving third, but the book does stick with Laura more than any other character.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So maybe, obviously, we can't fully trust Laura's version of events, but then it's not one of Christie's actual unreliable narrators, because it isn't the first person.
Yeah, but we do get an insight into the thoughts we're told from our sort of omniscient third-person narrator that compared with Charles, Laura was an anticlimax, according to the mother. A quiet, disappointing child, well-behaved, giving no trouble, but lacking in, what was it, personality. And Laura knows this. This is, Laura has overheard her mother saying, Laura's a dear child, of course, but rather a dull child. And she accepted that with the justice and honesty of hopelessness. And I have to say that Agatha does describe Rosalind in not dissimilar terms in the autobiography, that she goes, I just couldn't understand why she couldn't have the imagination to go and play by herself. Not in a harsh way, because actually they do talk much later about how funny they find it, that they're quite different people. But there is this world in which you could just take that one step further and go, well, but what if you go, oh, she's a disappointment because she's not a writer. And that isn't what happens in Agatha's world, but that is what happens in The Burden.
Yeah.
Is that, oh, you're not the child I want you to be.
Yeah. Well, or push that further, and I've said this a few times in our Westmapod journey, but push that further and end up with a murder, which is what, if this were a Agatha Christie book, that's maybe where you would go, is going these bitternesses and hatreds and difficulties that she exhibits as Mary Westmacott, that often the dial just turns up to 11, and then that's what punctures through and makes it an Agatha Christie, is then leading to murder and chaos.
And then, before the big novel twist, we've got the little turn, because Laura saves Shirley from the burning building. And you love her, do you? Oh, yes. The answer came with some fervour. I love her better than anything in the world. But what I find really interesting is that we're constantly told how much Laura fears being overly possessive. And it's the fear of her really showing her true colours that causes so much of this trauma. That actually it's not her possessiveness, it's not a daughter's a daughter again, where we see it on both sides, but it's actually her being worried that she'll become like those types of characters. So she draws too far back, and she allows Shirley to go, when Shirley's under her care or is being guided by her in some way, Laura's going, oh gosh, well, I don't want to be that person, and so I'm going to let her.
Yeah. If we could just dwell on the fire for a moment. So, I mean, this is an example of the quality of writing in this book, I think. So the actual moment when it happens, we've been saying, haven't we, about how there's little twists and little flashpoints of drama throughout, that Westmacott really does rope pull with them. She doesn't signpost them at all, to the point where, and maybe this is why people don't always get on with this book, you could miss them if you weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
I think Mary Westmacott demands your attention for The Burden more than she ever has done before, and I think maybe that's why some people don't get on with it.
I agree. We've even had discussions ourselves where we've spoken to each other and been like, was that your reading of who that person was and what's going on there? So.
But I don't think that's any bad thing. I think an author is well within their rights to expect us to bring our attention to a literary novel, that part of close reading. So she writes, there was no final warning. This is the new nursemaid, that she went down like a stone, lying there on the floor, jerking and twisting. The spirit lamp fell to the floor, and the flame from it ran across the carpet and reached the end of the muslin curtains. And then we're off. And it's such a short paragraph, and it comes pretty much from nowhere. You're sort of signposted about the nursemaid hiding something, but we didn't realise it was epilepsy until later on. Also, so Laura then is specifically described as having lost her eyelashes in the fire, and that when she looks at Baldy, he think she's radiant because she's now in love with Shirley, but she's also sort of grotesque in the way that she's not got eyelashes and stuff. And I thought it was interesting how the narrative refuses to let Laura be the full heroine there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
As in, she's just done this incredible thing, but it's not. That doesn't mean it's going to be all plain sailing for Laura and Shirley now.
No.
You know, she's burnt by it. She's literally burnt by it. Their relationship will still face adversity. And Westmacott does the same thing with the sudden dispatch of Angela and Arthur, the parents.
Yes.
The child of 11 couldn't, of course, foresee the future. The Franklins taking a brief holiday together, flying to Le Touquet, and the plane crashing on the return journey. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little spate of the occasional handy plane crash in Agatha Christie, as we said. Yes, there's the clocks.
We're coming up to.
And there's one or two where justice is served by means of God striking down the plane. I am flying in like 6 days.
Yeah. Well,
I'll have to be on my best behaviour.
We were going to record this literally just before you flew, so I thought I'd do you a solid and let you have a few days to.
Thank you. So I can sign off on it before
a few final days. Yeah, exactly. But it also, I think, presages the idea that the book will be flying off soon, that the book will be travelling as well, and that the narrative will be moving. You also kind of need the parents to get out of the way narratively so that we can focus on the idea as Laura as Shirley's sister/mum and possessive ? You know?
So Laura, her character has to change because of this, and so she becomes not just like an older sister, or not just an older sister, but a parental figure. But she becomes a different person as a result. And I noticed that you pointed this out, that actually, because I do feel like Laura is our protagonist really in this novel, but she is the only one of the three siblings who survives to the end of the book. That Charles obviously dies early on, and Shirley, who has got so much hope, you know, the two children had so much hope from their parents, are the ones that don't make it, aren't they?
Well, and Angela literally goes, why couldn't Laura be the one that died instead? And the irony being she's the one that survives. Yeah. And we've been saying how we're sort of heading towards a quote unquote modern world, and I think the way that Laura's character changes does highlight that. We both spotted and have talked about that before, down to the makeup. Actually, the way that Agatha or Mary shows Sarah Prentice in A Daughter's Daughter becoming a modern woman and straining at the leash of her mum and the complications between their relationship. She does the same thing with Laura and Shirley. And indeed, there's talk of them going and sharing a flat.
Yeah.
And I'd be remiss not to shout out Third Girl. I wonder if we could just finish off our chat about Laura's half of the narrative with a discussion of her friendship with Baldy.
Which is the other thing I always remember. I'm like, and isn't there like a weird friendship with this guy?
Do you think it's weird?
Do you know what always makes me think of, in my head, right, okay, I don't know if this would make it to the episode. In my head, it feels like she's going and speaking to like Arthur Fowler from EastEnders, like going up to the allotment and stuff and going and having a chat all the time, or like in Partners in Crime.
Yeah, couldn't it be Donna and Wilf on the allotment?
Exactly, it's exactly the same sort of thing. Yeah.
I think it's written quite innocently, but there is a darker reading you can impose.
I think it's written very innocently. Yeah, I think it's.
I mean, is it Pip and Miss Havisham? Because, you know, there's that bit where he sort of goes, nobody's allowed to dust in here, you know, on your own head be it kind of thing. And also I wondered, there's a reference to the White Queen from Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Oh, yes.
At one point. And I wondered, and that made me think, I don't know, Alice Liddell and C.S. Lewis. There are various references there, and some of them darker than others maybe. But I think his dialogue, from a Westmacott perspective, his dialogue is written in the way that, you know, I talked last time about the sort of camp old women that you get threaded throughout the Westmacotts, like Blanche in Absent in the Spring, like Dame Laura, Lady Laura in A Daughter's a Daughter. It's like Mr. Baldock is kind of our version of that, but he's made male because Christie wants to use, because Christie has these punchlines prepared about his old-fashioned perspective on women. In fact, there's a bit, isn't there, where he's slagging off women, and Laura sort of Laura's a girl at this point. She sort of apologizes for womankind, and he says, "Not yet. You're not. Thank goodness." He basically goes, "It's time for you to go now. Friendship should never be strained too far." And he says to his housekeeper, "Children and one's social inferiors never know when to say goodbye. One has to say it for them."
Oh.
Okay, so we've done Laura's story. Now, Llewwelyn's story. How did you feel about that moment, that twist?
I liked it. I think it is a great idea. I don't know if it's executed as well as it could be, because I think it comes as such a surprise that it's not necessarily initially a pleasant one. Like, I think you're so disorientated from it, and I think when I reread it knowing it was coming, I got a lot more out of it.
Exactly.
Whereas your first reading, it's very much, what is this? And I suddenly felt like I was having to be really alert to who everyone was and trying to work out if these were people. I know,
that's what she's inviting you to do.
But I had, as initially as a reader, I was a bit like, where are we going here? But when you know it's going to go somewhere, then I think you get much more out of it.
Yes. I will defend Mary Westmacott on this. I agree. I think the first time I read it, I had a very disorientated reaction, as you did, and enjoyed it a lot more on second read. It reminded me of the experience of reading another favourite writer of mine, who I will talk about in the "If You Like This, Try That" section. I mean, narratively, the signposting is there because Laura and Shirley's story gets parked. It doesn't get finished, and we do come back to them, but it feels like it's parked. And you're going into part 3 of 4, so it's half of the book in those terms, in terms of the parts. I think you're supposed to go, who is Llewwelyn? Have we met him before? You're supposed to flick back. You're supposed to go, is this a new name for someone? And then when he starts talking to a girl, you're supposed to be going, is this Shirley? Is this Laura? Is this someone different? And I think probably in an Agatha Christie, it would be unfair to expect the reader to play that kind of game with you, because, as John Curran would say, she's expecting you to play a genre-based game, a puzzle game with you, a different kind of game with you. It'd be unfair to expect you to play Scrabble and checkers at the same time. But I think in a literary novel, you are attention is expected, and I would say in terms of the thematic content, all the signposting is there as well. I mean, Llewwelyn's story is all about his finding a sense of spirituality and his ascending to, in book terms, protagonist level, which is essentially what he's done in the book, right? And also Shirley, Laura, and Charles's story is saturated with Christianity. I mean, we literally open it in a church at the christening. So I do think she justifies it, but I'm not surprised that people, myself included on first reading, you included on first reading, find it difficult to manage. I think you've got to almost retrain your brain into going, this is an Agatha Christie whodunit, but it's who is Laura, who is Shirley, and why are we doing this? Why does it matter? And of course, spoiler, but it turns out to matter at the very end of the story, because Llewwelyn turns out to be Laura's soulmate, essentially. Also, don't you then get a real sense of reward when we do then get Laura again?
Yes,
and Shirley again. Yes, it's such a punch through moment. You're like, yeah, I know where we are again now.
Yes, I didn't know that we were going to see Laura again. And when we first meet that woman, which we discover is Shirley, but I every time I've read it, actually, it was probably 3 or 4 times, I've gone to, is this going to be Laura or Shirley? I feel it must be one of them. Yeah. And there are clues quite early on that it should be Shirley, but you're not completely sure for a while.
Or indeed someone new. You go,
that's
it could
true.
Be. And also time's moved on, so it's 10 years on from the last part. So, and I think, and Christie does this a few times in the Westmacotts. Well, actually, no, in all of her books, she plays with, to come back to feminism, she plays with the idea that women have these shifting, in narrative terms, these shifting identities throughout their lives, because of course they're expected to give up their name. You know, Shirley Franklin becomes Lady Wilding. You know, that in terms of character labels, she's completely, and that's not the first time we've had that. to talk a bit then about Llewwelyn Knox. So he's American. He has this Celtic heritage. Llewwelyn is a very Welsh name.
Yes.
And he has a Welsh mum. I think that, there's a quote, you had all the necessary heredity, as in he had all the capacity to go spiritual.
Yeah.
Because he has all this Celtic blood, which is a stereotype. It's probably one that the Celts won't mind, that the Scottish and Welsh won't mind, as opposed to some of the other stereotyping we see in some of these books. But yes, the mystic from the Scottish side and the poetic and the orative from the Welsh, the voice too. So we get, I think, quite a vivid sense of what he's like.
Yeah.
And she at one point says he walks decisively like someone from where he's from, kind of thing, meaning, I think, Americans, that they walk with purpose. And then Knox, is she getting that from Dilly? Dilly Knox? You know, Dilly Knox, the spy catcher, who is essentially the one that investigates her for using the name Bletchley in NRM, because that suggests that she had privileged insider knowledge to the war effort that she shouldn't have had and certainly shouldn't have published.
Yeah.
And it probably was a coincidence, but he goes and speaks to her.
Yes.
So again, even in his name, and Christie venerates the Welsh and Welsh culture. She's always been interested in Wales and becomes even more interested when Rosalind marries into a big Welsh family. It feels like just in terms of the name, she's giving him a significance that's saying to us in 2026 reading this, like, pay attention to him.
Yeah. And also pay attention to the type of person and how they're communicating, because we've got some Passenger to Frankfurt foreshadowing here, because references to audiences being swayed by charismatic leaders who get idolised is a reference to both Hitler and Lloyd George, actually, being able to convince large audiences and to so there's a hint of that, isn't there?
Him? So he has this epiphany on the mountain. He sees three visions, one of which turns out to be of Laura, which is how he knows that Laura is his love, the love of his life. But one of which is him being a businessman, essentially, and it makes him think that his calling is to be a sort of Christian hero, pop star, evangelist.
Yes,
which feels very ahead of its time. It feels like, Tammy Faye and
and
where we move in towards the end of our swing era. We've talked about 1971, the Festival of Light, and people like Cliff Richard and Mary Whitehouse standing up and in these big arenas and
mass religion relayed by loudspeakers, it's referred to.
Exactly, that feels very ahead of its time. There's something gauche to her about people standing up in an arena and spreading the gospel in a way that there isn't something gauche about the curate that is standing in for the vicar because the vicar's got a cold in the little country church in the prelude, in the prologue.
Yeah.
And we've come a long way from that in this novel.
Yeah.
But yeah, Richard really punctures it, doesn't he? The artist, he says, like, I know you, I know who you are.
Yeah.
And he kind of gives the other side to it, because Llewwelyn is likeable initially, and then you start to go, is this a problematic figure?
Yeah.
And Christie never really answers that. Lets you decide. Although I guess the fact that he gets with Laura kind of endorses the narrative, kind of endorses.
But it's not a straightforward journey to that. And,
no.
And the sort of still open-endedness of it. There is a sequel here. If anyone should want to write about what happens after this book ends.
Well, the sequel is Siegfried in Passengers of Frankfurt.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. All done.
Our regular, if you like this, try that section. Dr. Mark Aldridge, take it away.
Well, we were discussing this before, and I was like, I don't have an obvious one. And you said, is there anything you've read where it goes in a sudden direction, like where it goes somewhere different?
Yeah.
And my first thought was A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle, which has got that thing of where there is one story, but wrapped within that is a huge, great flashback that gives you the motivation of why characters might have done particular things, but also is not particularly important to the story. Like, it's just there to explain something rather than it to to really shine a lot of light on the ongoing narrative. So I guess if you
And
like
indeed,
your...
on reread, I'm not saying this for the burden, but for Study in Scarlet, I think I just skipped that bit
Oh,
and
you
carried on
absolutely
with the...
can. Yeah, you absolutely can. So yeah, if you are somebody who wants to read someone who's written classic crime and wants to read a story that's going to have a bit of a handbrake turn at some point, then I'm going to say A Study in Scarlet.
Yeah. We don't talk about Conan Doyle much, I guess, because the periods of Agatha's life that we talk about, he's gone by then.
And they never met. You think they would have, wouldn't you?
Is A Study in Scarlet your favourite of the Sherlock Holmes canon, would you say?
No, not at all.
No.
No, not close. In fact, I don't hugely rate any of the novels. I think the Big Four's okay. Not the Big Four.
The Big Four?
Yeah, which is a mistake that's in Agatha Christie on Screen, by the way, that I do at one point call.
Really?
Yeah, because I refer to the Sign of Four, and I refer to call it the Big Four.
Well, I like to think Agatha would be thrilled by that, because that is the point. That it's kind of a parody title, right?
Yeah, but no, the short stories are miles better for my money.
What's your favourite short story then?
I love The Red-Headed League. That's a real classic.
Well, you would.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of my favourites. Actually, I do genuinely remember as a kid being like, oh, look, it's a whole story about genders like me.
Oh. Yeah. The Patrick Melrose novels by Edward St. Auburn, they were televised not that long ago with Benedict Cumberbatch playing the lead character. I don't know if you remember.
No, I don't, no.
So Patrick Melrose, they're autofiction. It's a cycle of 5 novels. They are, well, I was going to say they're incredible. I personally think the first 3 are incredible, and he probably should have left it there. And then he writes the 4th, which is Mother's Milk, which I think is quite poor, but I'm clearly reading something different to everyone else because that was the one that did really well. And then he wrote a 5th to kind of cap it off. But the 4th, he's very open about the fact that the 4th wasn't actually supposed to be a Patrick Melrose novel, and he literally did a Control F and changed the main character's name.
Oh my God.
Because he just sort of wrote it to a point where it just sort of became Patrick. It just sort of came out of him. Anyway, they are very complicated, very emotionally astute novels about growing up, finding yourself, seeking happiness in the face of trauma and abuse and addiction and difficulty. And for all intents and purposes, they could be Mary Westmacott novels, because those are all things that we've discussed across these episodes. And I'm a little bit embarrassed that it's taken me until the burden to make that connection. But the other thing I wanted to say was, we've talked a lot in this episode about that handbrake turn that the novel takes when you suddenly go to Llewwelyn. And that is something that I felt with Alan Hollinghurst's writing that he's quite keen on. Hollinghurst does that thing. He does it in The Line of Beauty, where, I won't be too specific because it will spoil things, but a character, you leave one part thinking that you will open the next page and a character will be with the character that you've just seen him with, and they'll be maybe not happy, but a few years later they'll be together. And not only does that other character disappear from the narrative completely, but the guy is with someone else, and then 100 pages later you find out the other one's dead. And that much has changed in that gap. So,
and we're going to discuss who is Mary Westmacott in the Reflections episode, aren't we? Because we've reached the end of book 6, so we'll pause on that question, which we usually ask at the end of these episodes, for a little bit. We are going to be doing our Reflections episodes probably in a couple of months. So do drop us a line and do talk to us about anything that you think we should be picking up on, or that you picked up on that you think is interesting from any of the Westmacott books. And of course, do let us have a look at the copies of the book that you've got. Show us where you've been reading them. And we'd also be interested to know which are your favourites and which ones didn't work so well for you. I know just from chatting to people that there are real variety of opinions here about which one's the strongest.
More so than with Christie's.
Yes, I would say so.
Less consensus than with Christie's, which is maybe because these are so under-discussed compared to, which is why we're doing this in the first place.
Indeed.
Yeah, super interesting.
Westmafan.
Yeah. Please pre-order the Swinging Christie's book, because We put loads of work into
Oh,
it.
it's been so much work. We're still working on it now.
We're still working on it now.
Just tidying up those little footnotes and things.
Just the finishing touches just to make it perfect. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun and we're really proud of it. So, and also, of course, stay subscribed to the Swinging Christie's feed as well as this feed. There'll be more episodes there every month. And please, if you don't mind giving us a little rating, review, if you haven't already, and yeah, stay subscribed.
Yeah, and do get in touch. Our Instagram is at Christie_time. Our Blue Sky account is at christietime.com, which is also our website. You can email us at christietimepod@gmail.com. Our YouTube is at Westmapod and is also at The Swinging Christies. Gray's website is grayrobertbrown.wixsite.com/grayrobertbrown. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Mark Aldridge and on Blue Sky at markaldridge.info, which is also my website address.
And finally, we unburden ourselves.
Oh,
Westmapod.
Westmapod,
Mark.
Bye, Westmapod. Where's Westma going?
Thank you so much for listening. Westmapod is a Christie Time project by Dr. Mark Aldridge and Gray Robert Brown. This episode was recorded in Southampton on the 19th and 20th of April 2026. Our artwork is designed by Tom Double and our music is by Dar Golan.
And it had a very different working title as well, according to John Curran, of Angle of Attack.
What song does that make you think of?
Under Attack by Ava.
Attack.
Angle of Attack. Under Attack.
I love that song.
Yeah, me too.
It's so good.
Yeah. We're both sort of latter ABBA fans, aren't we? As in,
yeah,
I
well,
think, from like the Visitors on, really.
like with Christie,
Oh, yeah.
they're just not played enough, not talked about enough, not appreciated enough. But yeah, the day before I came, I think it was incredible. The day before you came. There's not I think a single episode of Dallas that I didn't see. I mean, what a lyric! What a lyric!